The paper felt heavier than it should have, a single sheet that outweighed the sum of a decade. It lay on the passenger seat of my car, the crisp legal font spelling out the end of things: petition for dissolution of marriage. Julian's name and mine, linked one last time by a sterile, procedural V4 verses. I sat there in the silence of my parked minivan, the engine off, the air thick with the scent of stale goldfish crackers and the ghost of my life as I knew it. How did it come to this? It's a cliché question, the kind whispered in late-night movies, but my mind kept circling back to it, searching for a single point of impact, a ground zero for the devastation. And it always landed in the same place, on a joke. A stupid, careless, bitter little joke. My name is Clara. Before the petition, I was Clara, wife of Julian, mother to Lily and Leo. My world was a meticulously curated ecosystem of school runs, playdates, laundry cycles, and the constant, low-grade hum of domestic responsibility. Lily was 7, a whirlwind of glitter and questions. Leo was 4, a sweet, sticky-fingered tornado. They were my universe, and I had convinced myself that managing their world was enough. It had to be. Julian was a good man. I need to say that, to remember it. He was a provider, the steady bedrock upon which I had built our family. He worked in architecture, a profession of long hours and high stress, designing beautiful spaces for other families to live in, while ours began to feel increasingly cramped and airless. He would come home late, his shoulders slumped with the weight of his day, the scent of the city clinging to his coat. I would be waiting, not with a kiss, but with a litany of the day's grievances. Leo had refused his nap. The dishwasher was making a strange noise. Lily's teacher wanted to schedule another conference. I'd unload my day onto his already burdened back, and watch as his face, the face I once loved to trace with my fingertips, shuttered closed. I didn't see it then, of course. I only saw my own exhaustion, my own unacknowledged sacrifices. I was the one navigating the tantrums, cleaning the spills, soothing the nightmares. I was the one whose professional ambitions had been neatly packed away in a box labeled, "For later." A quiet resentment began to take root in my heart, a noxious weed twisting around the foundations of our marriage. I resented his freedom, his adult conversations, the simple act of him leaving the house each morning while I was left behind in the beautiful, chaotic prison we had built together. I resented him for being exactly what he was supposed to be, the provider, the rock. But a rock can't hold you. It can only anchor you, and I was starting to feel like I was drowning. The night it started was a Friday, a rare, precious evening without the children. My parents had taken them for the weekend, and the silence in the house was so profound it felt like a presence in itself. Julian, in a gesture I should have cherished, was trying to make a nice dinner. He was fumbling with a recipe for salmon with a dill sauce, his brow furrowed in concentration. I sat at the kitchen island, a glass of Chardonnay sweating in my hand, watching him. He was talking about a project at work, some new sustainable high-rise. I was only half listening, my mind replaying the week's frustrations. The overtime he'd pulled every single night. The way I'd felt utterly alone trying to manage Lily's anxiety about her school play and Leo's sudden fear of the dark. The attention I craved wasn't just for my body, it was for my mind, for the woman I was before I became mom. And he was too tired to give it. I don't even remember what led directly to it. Maybe he said something about being exhausted. Maybe I felt a pang of jealousy for the colleagues he spent more waking hours with than me. Whatever it was, the thought formed and slipped past my lips before I could stop it, coated in a saccharine laugh to disguise its venom. "You've been working so much," I said, swirling the wine in my glass. "It's a good thing I'm so patient." I laughed, a brittle sound in the quiet kitchen. He smiled, a tired, grateful smile. But I didn't stop there. The resentment needed more air. "You know," I continued, leaning forward conspiratorially as if sharing a secret, "I could have chosen a very different life. A man with a lot more time, maybe a little less ambition." I paused for effect, letting the words hang in the air between us. He stopped stirring the sauce, his back still to me. Then came the final, fatal blow. I delivered it with a playful wink, the ultimate performance of carelessness. "You know you were my second choice, right?" I laughed again, louder this time, a performance for an audience of one. The silence that followed was absolute. He didn't turn around. but I saw his shoulders stiffen, just slightly. A full 30 seconds passed. He slowly placed the spoon on the counter, the clink of metal on granite echoing in the room. When he finally turned to face me, his expression wasn't angry. It was worse. It was hollow. The light in his eyes, the warm, steady light I had fallen in love with, had been extinguished. I saw the hurt, stark and deep, a wound I had just inflicted with the casual cruelty of a child pulling the wings off a fly. "It was just a joke, Jules," I said quickly, my own laughter suddenly sounding forced and ugly. "Just a stupid joke. You're being too sensitive." He just stared at me for a moment longer before turning back to the stove. "The salmon's almost ready," he said, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. It wasn't just a stupid joke. It was a crack in the foundation of everything we had built. And in my arrogance and my bitterness, I had just handed him the sledgehammer. I drank my wine, oblivious to the fact that I was toasting the beginning of the end. In the days that followed, I tried to pretend that nothing had changed, that the joke had evaporated into the air like the steam from that ill-fated salmon. But something had fundamentally shifted between us. It wasn't a loud, dramatic break, but a quiet, insidious cooling. The warmth that had always existed in the spaces between us, the easy comfort of a shared life, was gone. It was replaced by a silence that was heavier and more articulate than any argument. Julian retreated. It was a gradual process, like a tide going out so slowly you barely notice, until you look up and find the shoreline has moved 100 feet away. He stopped sharing details about his work. Our conversations, once a lively exchange about our days, devolved into logistical briefings. "Who's picking up Lily from soccer? Did you remember to buy more milk? The man I married, the one who would tell me about the quirky personalities in his office or the frustrations of a design flaw, was gone. In his place was a polite, efficient roommate. The dinners became the worst part. I would try to fill the silence, chattering about the kids' latest antics, but my words would fall into the void between us. Julian would nod, murmur "That's nice, honey," but his eyes would be distant, focused on something over my shoulder. He was physically present, but his spirit, his attention, had checked out. He was a ghost at his own dinner table. And then there was the phone. His phone, which had once been casually tossed on the counter, was now his constant companion, a sleek black shield. He'd place it face down on the table during meals, a gesture that was somehow more suspicious than if he'd been actively using it. A vibration from its depths would cause a subtle tension in his jaw. He started taking it with him into the bathroom. "Who are you texting all the time?" I asked one night, trying to make my voice sound light and teasing, but the edge of accusation was unmistakable. "Just work stuff," he'd reply without looking up. "Group chat about the new project. It's relentless." I didn't believe him, but I didn't push. Pushing would make me seem like a nag, a controlling wife, the very things I despised. So I let it go, and the silence grew wider, filled now with the buzzing of my own unspoken suspicions. My coping mechanism, the one that had started this whole mess, went into overdrive. I used sarcasm as a weapon, hurling brittle, unfunny jokes into the chasm between us, hoping to force a reaction, any reaction at all. "Did your phone get surgically attached to your hand, or is that a new upgrade?" I'd say as he scrolled through it on the couch. He wouldn't even flinch. "Just a minute, Clara." His late nights became more frequent. "Drinks with the guys," he'd text. "Don't wait up." At first I accepted it. Maybe he needed to blow off steam. But the guys became a recurring feature of our week. I felt a spike of anger. He got to have a life, an escape, while I was here, tethered to the house and the children. I was the one who deserved a break, not him. The narrative in my head was simple. I was the martyr, and he was the selfish husband, abandoning his family for beers with his friends. It was a comforting story because it absolved me of all responsibility. It didn't require me to look at my own behavior, at the cold shoulder I'd given him for weeks, at the way I had systematically dismantled his sense of being wanted and valued in his own home. It was easier to be angry than to be scared. And I was terrified. Terrified that I had broken something I didn't know how to fix. One evening, I tried. I really did. The kids were asleep, and Julian was staring blankly at the television. I sat next to him on the couch, leaving a careful foot of space between us. "Jules," I said softly, "are we okay?" He took a long moment to answer, his eyes still on the screen. We're fine, Clara, just tired. No, we're not, I pressed, a knot of desperation tightening in my chest. You're distant, ever since that night. That stupid joke. He finally turned to look at me, and his eyes were weary, so incredibly weary. A joke is supposed to be funny, he said, his voice quiet but sharp. What you said, it wasn't funny. It was just true, wasn't it? I was stunned into silence. I had expected him to deny it, to tell me I was imagining things. I hadn't expected him to call my bluff. Of course not, I stammered, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. It was a ridiculous thing to say. I was just trying to get a rise out of you. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Well, you succeeded. He stood up from the couch. I'm going to bed. Early start tomorrow. Oh. He left me sitting there in the flickering blue light of the television, the silence he left behind ringing in my ears. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't argued. He had simply held up a mirror, and I couldn't stand the reflection. So I did what I had become so good at doing. I got angry. I told myself he was twisting my words, that he was the one creating the drama. I went to bed and lay with my back to him, the space between us and the mattress feeling as wide and as cold as an ocean. The silence was no longer just an absence of sound. It was a presence, a third entity in our marriage, suffocating everything in its path. The paranoia started to feel like a low-grade fever, a constant thrum of anxiety just beneath the surface of my daily routine. Every time Julian's phone buzzed, my stomach would clench. Every late night he worked was another piece of evidence in the case I was building against him in my mind. The name of his crime was indifference, but I was beginning to suspect it was something far more concrete. My anger became my shield. It was easier to be furious with him for his secrecy than to be terrified of what that secrecy might mean. I was the wronged wife, the underappreciated mother. This narrative powered me through the long days, but it did nothing to soothe me in the quiet, lonely nights. The discovery happened on a Tuesday. It was a completely ordinary night. I had just finished tucking Leo in, his small body already limp with sleep. Lily was in her room, listening to an audiobook. Julian was downstairs, supposedly catching up on emails. I walked into our bedroom to grab a book and saw his phone lying on the nightstand, charging. This in itself was unusual. He'd become so attached to it. It was like a missing limb when it wasn't in his hand. As I reached for my book, the screen lit up. A single message notification. And on it, a name I didn't recognize. Sasha, you left your jacket. Hope you're not too cold on your way home. See you tomorrow. Sasha. The name was simple, 4 letters, but it landed in my consciousness like a stone. It wasn't a man's name. It wasn't one of the guys, and the winking emoji at the end felt like a tiny digital punch to the gut. It was intimate, playful. Everything he and I were not anymore. My heart started hammering against my ribs. My breath caught in my throat. I stood frozen for a full minute, staring at the screen until it went dark again. My first instinct was to grab the phone, to unlock it, to tear through every message, every photo, every call log. But I couldn't. It felt like a final violation, a step from which there was no return. Instead, I walked back downstairs, my body moving on autopilot. Julian was on the couch, his laptop open, but he was staring at the television. He looked up as I entered the room, his expression neutral. I couldn't hold it in. The carefully constructed dam of my composure broke. Who the hell is Sasha? The words came out sharper, louder than I intended. Julian's face went from neutral to pale in a split second. It was the look of a man caught. His eyes darted around the room, anywhere but at me. That was all the confirmation I needed. What are you talking about? He said, his voice strained. Sasha, I repeated, stepping closer. She just texted you. Worried you'd be cold without your jacket. How thoughtful of her. My voice was dripping with a venom that surprised even me. He closed the laptop, a gesture of finality. He took a deep breath. She's just a coworker, Clara. We were working late on a presentation. A coworker? I let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. Does this coworker always send you winky faces? Does this coworker know you're married? With 2 children? You saw the message? He sounded more annoyed than guilty, which only fueled my rage. You were snooping on my phone? It was on the nightstand. The screen lit up. I was shouting now. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me, Julian. What is going on? Nothing is going on, he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. He wouldn't look at me. We're just friends. It's not like that. Not like that? I was pacing now, my hands clenched into fists. What is it like, then? Is she the one you're having drinks with? Is she the one you're texting all night while you ignore your wife? Is she funny? Does she think your jokes are hilarious? Does she not tell you you're her second choice? The last question hung in the air, ugly and raw. His face hardened. He finally met my gaze, and his eyes were cold. This is what you do, Clara, he said, his voice low and steady. You push and you push until you get the reaction you want. You create a problem, and then you get to be the victim. I'm creating this? You're the one getting secret, flirty texts from some woman, and I'm the one creating the problem? I was incredulous. The audacity of him was breathtaking. The argument raged for another hour. It was a circular, pointless battle of accusations and deflections. He never admitted to anything concrete, but his denials were so weak, so full of holes, that they were as good as a confession. By the end of it, I was exhausted, emotionally flayed. He retreated to the guest room, and I was left alone in the living room, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the name Sasha repeating in my mind like a mantra of betrayal. I thought about her winking emoji, her casual intimacy. I imagined her laughing with my husband, listening to his problems, offering him the comfort and validation he no longer found at home. And for the first time, a sliver of terrifying clarity cut through my anger. Was she the reason he was pulling away? Or was she simply the destination he arrived at after I had pushed him out the door? I crushed the thought immediately. It was too painful to consider. It was easier, so much easier, to hate them both. The days following the fight over Sasha were a masterclass in psychological warfare. We moved through our home like two hostile ghosts, communicating only in clipped, necessary sentences about the children. The tension was a physical thing, a thick, unbreathable smog that filled every room. Julian was more distant than ever, and I was a coiled spring of suspicion and rage. I checked his phone every chance I got, but he'd changed the password. The door to his secret world was now locked, and it was driving me mad. I told myself I was overreacting, that Sasha could just be a coworker, but my intuition, that deep, primal gut feeling, screamed that I was being lied to. I wanted to catch him. I wanted irrefutable proof, something I could hold up and say, "See? I wasn't crazy. I was right." It was a toxic impulse, but it consumed me. The opportunity came on a Wednesday afternoon. I was supposed to have coffee with a friend after picking Lily up from school, but she canceled at the last minute. Julian thought I would be out of the house for at least another 2 hours. A dark, impulsive idea took hold. I would go home. I would surprise him. My heart hammered against my ribs the entire drive home, a frantic drumbeat of dread and anticipation. Lily was chattering in the back seat about her art project, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in her mother's soul. I parked the car down the street, telling Lily we were going to play a surprise game on Daddy. Her excited giggles felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I unlocked the front door as quietly as I could. "Okay, sweetie," I whispered to Lily. "You stay here in the hall for a minute. Mommy's going to go find Daddy first." The first thing I noticed was the smell. It was perfume. A sweet, floral scent that was definitely not mine. It was an alien scent in my home, an immediate signal of trespass. My blood ran cold. I walked slowly down the hall, my footsteps silent on the runner. The house was quiet, but it was a charged quiet. The door to our bedroom was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. And there they were. It wasn't what I had expected, not some sordid, cinematic scene of passion. It was almost worse for its casual intimacy. Julian was sitting on the edge of our bed, and beside him, her legs crossed comfortably as if she belonged there, was a woman I had never seen before. Sasha. She was laughing at something he'd just said, her head tilted back. They weren't touching, but the space between them was electric. They were in their own world, a world that existed inside my bedroom, on my bed. My heart didn't just drop, it vaporized. A white-hot rage washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. I must have made a sound, a choked gasp, because Julian's head snapped up. His eyes met mine, and they went wide with pure, unadulterated panic. Sasha's laughter died in her throat, her face freezing in a mask of alarm. "Clara," Julian stammered, jumping to his feet. "This isn't what you think." "It's a funny line, isn't it? The one every cheating spouse in every movie uses." I had always wondered what I would do if I heard it. Now I knew. "Really?" My voice came out as a low, dangerous snarl. "Then what, exactly, do you think I'm thinking, Julian? Because from where I'm standing, I think there's a strange woman in our bedroom smelling up the place with her cheap perfume." Sasha scrambled off the bed, gathering her purse. "I should go," she mumbled, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Oh, you think?" I shot back, my focus entirely on Julian. "You bring her into our home? Into the bed where our children were conceived? Are you out of your mind?" "It's not like that, we were just talking," he pleaded, his hands raised in a useless gesture of defense. The rage inside me was a wildfire, burning away all reason, all restraint. "Talking? Is that what you call it? All those late nights, all those secret texts? Were you just talking then too? You are a liar, Julian. A pathetic, cowardly liar." I was pacing, a caged animal, too angry to stand still. He kept trying to speak, to offer some flimsy explanation, but I shouted over him every time. I threw every ounce of my pain, my frustration, my bitterness at him. I brought up every past grievance, every lonely night, every time I had felt ignored or unloved. It all came pouring out in a torrent of vitriol. "I gave you everything," I screamed, my voice cracking. "I took care of our family, our children. I put my entire life on hold for this family, and you repay me by sneaking around with her." By the time I paused for breath, Sasha was gone. Julian was just standing there, his face a stony mask. The panic was gone, replaced by a chilling resignation. There was no remorse in his eyes, no regret. I wanted him to break down, to beg for forgiveness, to tell me it was a mistake. He did none of those things. Instead, he looked at me, his eyes empty of the man I once knew, and said the words that would detonate the rest of my life. "I don't think this is working anymore, Clara." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. "What? You don't think it's working? You're the one who cheated, and now you want to throw our family away?" His face was set. "I can't fix this," he said quietly, his voice heavy with finality. "It's over." Over. The word didn't compute. And then, in the smoking crater of my rage, a strange and terrible feeling surfaced. Relief. A sudden, shocking wave of relief, that I didn't have to pretend anymore. That the fight was finally over. But the relief was immediately swallowed by a fresh surge of fury. He had pushed me to this. He had made me feel like second place in my own marriage, and now he was walking away. Just then, I heard a small sound from the doorway. I turned, and my heart shattered into a million pieces. Lily was standing there, her small face pale, her eyes wide with fear and confusion, clutching the teddy bear she couldn't sleep without. She had heard everything. In that moment, I saw it all. I wasn't just losing my husband. I was losing my family, and in my blind rage, I had let my daughter stand in the crossfire. The weight of it all came crashing down, and for the first time, I looked at the wreckage around me and wondered what part of it I had built myself. The days after the confrontation were a blur of hollow actions and profound emptiness. Julian packed a bag that night in a silence that was louder than our screaming match. The sound of the zipper on his duffel bag closing felt like a final, definitive severing. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just stood in the doorway and watched him erase himself from our home, from our life. The only sound was Lily, crying softly in her room, a sound that would become the new soundtrack to my evenings. Telling the children was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. How do you explain the concept of divorce to a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old? How do you articulate the failure of love in a way their innocent hearts can comprehend? I tried my best, using gentle, rehearsed words about how Mommy and Daddy loved them very much, but couldn't live in the same house anymore. Leo just asked if Daddy would be back to read him his bedtime story. Lily, older and more perceptive, simply asked, "Is it because of the lady in your room?" The question was a dagger, and the guilt was a poison seeping into my veins. The machinery of divorce began to grind into motion. Lawyers were called. Papers were filed. Our shared life was reduced to a series of assets to be divided: the house, the car, the savings account. Julian and I communicated only through our attorneys or terse text messages about visitation schedules. He was efficient, detached, as if he were managing the demolition of a building he had designed long ago. In those first few months, I clung to the role of the victim. It was my armor. I was the faithful wife who had been betrayed. I was the devoted mother left to pick up the pieces. I told this story to my friends, to my family, to my lawyer. They all nodded in sympathy, their faces a chorus of commiseration. Their support validated my narrative, reinforcing the wall of righteous anger I had built around myself. It was a simple, clean story with a villain and a heroine. But in the quiet of the night, when the house was still and the children were asleep, the echoes of my own words would come back to haunt me. "You know you were my second choice, right?" The memory of his face at that moment, the sudden extinguishing of light, the deep, silent wound would play on a loop in my mind. I started to see that our story wasn't so simple. His affair wasn't the beginning of the end. It was a symptom of a disease I had helped to cultivate. I thought about all the times I had met his exhaustion with my own list of demands. The times I had used sarcasm as a shield, deflecting any attempt at genuine connection. The way I had resented him for providing the very life I claimed to want. I had been so wrapped up in my own frustrations, so convinced of my own martyrdom, that I never stopped to consider his. I never asked him if he was happy. I never acknowledged the pressure he was under. I had treated his love and his presence as a given, something I was entitled to, and I had chipped away at it with my bitterness and my careless words until there was nothing left but rubble. One afternoon, while sorting through old photo albums for the lawyers, I found a picture from our honeymoon. We were in Italy, standing on a sun-drenched balcony overlooking the sea. We were so young. I was leaning into him, my head on his shoulder, and he was looking down at me with an expression of such pure, unadulterated adoration that it stole my breath away. He was looking at me like I was his entire world. A sob escaped my lips, a raw, ragged sound. It wasn't a cry of anger or self-pity. It was a cry of profound, gut-wrenching regret. Where did that man go? And what had I done to make him leave? The truth was, I hadn't been paying attention. I was the caretaker of our family, yet I had failed to care for the most fragile thing of all, our marriage. I had focused on the logistics, the meals, the schedules, the clean house, while the emotional core of our partnership withered from neglect. I had pushed him away, slowly and systematically, and then acted surprised when he found comfort in someone else's arms. Sasha wasn't the cause of our divorce. She was just the one who was there to pick him up after I had let him fall. The anger didn't disappear overnight, but it was slowly being replaced by a heavy, aching accountability. I had played a part in this, a big one. The victim narrative crumbled, leaving me exposed and raw. There was no one else to blame for the emptiness of my house, for the sadness in my children's eyes. The ashes surrounding me were, at least in part, from a fire I had helped to start. And that realization was a far heavier burden than the betrayal had ever been. The final court hearing was an out-of-body experience. I sat at a polished wooden table, my lawyer beside me, a stranger in a suit who knew the intimate financial details of my failed marriage. Across from us sat Julian and his lawyer. He didn't look at me once, not once. He was calm, collected, his gaze fixed on the judge. He looked like a man closing a business deal, not a man dismantling a family. For him, I realized, the emotional divorce had happened long ago. This was just the paperwork. The kids weren't there, thank God. That was the one thing we had agreed on without argument. They didn't need to see this sterile, cold dissection of their family. They didn't need to see their father look at their mother as if she were a stranger. When the judge's gavel came down, the sound was dull, anticlimactic. It was done. We were legally, officially, no longer husband and wife. As we filed out of the courtroom, my lawyer patted my shoulder. Julian walked straight ahead, out the doors, and into his new life. A life free from me. The months that followed were a grueling education in survival. I was now a single mom, a title I had never wanted. The silence in the house after the kids were in bed was no longer just lonely. It was deafening. It was a silence filled with the weight of my choices, the ghosts of what could have been. There were moments of weakness, of course. Late at night, I would scroll through his old social media, a masochistic ritual, and see tagged photos of him with friends. He looked lighter, happier. A few months later, I heard through a mutual friend that he was seeing Sasha seriously. They had moved in together. The news should have devastated me, but mostly, I just felt a profound, weary sadness. He had moved on, as men often do. He found someone new who didn't know the man who used to look at me like I was his entire world. She got the version of him that was free from the baggage I had helped create. I hated myself for the small, bitter part of me that resented her for that. But mostly, I just hated myself for letting it all fall apart. Life became a series of firsts. The first birthday party I had to plan alone. The first parent-teacher conference I attended as Miss instead of Mrs. The first time Leo cried for his daddy in the middle of the night and I was the only one there to comfort him. Each one was a small paper cut on an already wounded heart. I had taken so much for granted. The stability, the partnership, the simple luxury of having someone else to share the burden. Now, the entire weight was on my shoulders, and some days I thought it would crush me. I had been so focused on playing the victim, on pointing the finger, that I had never stopped to look at my own role in the mess. Now, as I sat in the quiet of my house, the only sounds being the hum of the refrigerator and the distant chatter of my kids playing in their room, I finally understood the weight of it all. Life was never going to be the same. But slowly, imperceptibly at first, something began to shift. The crushing weight of regret began to transform into the solid foundation of lesson. I would never take love for granted again. I would never use words as weapons. I would teach my children, by example, how to communicate with honesty and kindness, not with bitterness and sarcasm. So here I am now, still figuring it all out. Some days are hard. Some days I look at Lily and see Julian's eyes staring back at me, and the ache is so sharp it takes my breath away. Some days I feel like I'll never get it right. But I'm trying. I'm trying to be better. For them. To make sure they don't feel the weight of my mistakes. The silence in my house is different now. It's no longer the heavy, charged silence of a dying marriage. It's a quieter, more contemplative silence. It's the silence of a woman learning to live with herself, learning to forgive herself. I don't know if I'll ever fully get over the way things ended, or the part I played in it. The scars will always be there. But maybe the mistakes are the only way we learn. Maybe you have to burn everything down to see what's worth rebuilding from the ashes. I lost my husband, and I lost the family I thought I would have forever. But in the wreckage, I am slowly, painstakingly finding myself. And I hope, for anyone out there who finds themselves standing at a similar precipice, that they can learn from my story before it's too late, before the silence becomes the only thing left to say.